Hey, just before we start the show, I just want to let you know we've got a new feature here that allows you to leave us a recorded message. I know sometimes there are things we're going to say on the show that you take issue with, that you agree with, we've missed the point, whatever it might be. So it's simple. Just go to the show notes and you'll find a link there that allows you just hit the record button, have your say, and it'll land in our inbox. And we'll probably include it in upcoming shows. So thanks for doing that. Now here's the show.
An original
from Story Studio Network.
Well, here we go. Look at that. The 14th day of December. A week and a half and Christmas Eve. And then, boy, you'll be writing the wrong dates on your checks before you know it. Into 2024. Welcome in. It's Now and Next. Dave Trafford here for Story Studio Network. And some of you have taken advantage of that voicemail link in the show notes. Thanks for doing that. And a couple people had some issues with it. It was tech issues. So apparently you have to actually give the app permission to use your microphone. And I don't think it's very good at asking that. So if you're having a problem making a recording, just go to the settings. Give it permission to fire up the microphone and you're in good shape. And happy to leave or take the messages as you guys are observing. Lots of feedback on last Friday's show on the Ledge. We wrap things up with the Ontario Politics Podcast with John Wright and Keith Leslie. So, same thing there. You can do that. But as we move into the, we're well into the season of giving. And it's funny, when I was asking people for a reaction, I had somebody reach out to me on social media and an email talking about, man, the shows you do are so heavy. Can we not talk about fun stuff? Can we not talk about, sort of lighter stuff that's going on in our lives? And I agree. I think, we got to kind of sprinkle that in and out of it. But I suggested to this particular individual that the week that I got the email from them, I'd had two of the most optimistic human beings, I think, on the planet on the show. Neil Hetherington from Daily Bread Food Bank and Julia Deans at Habitat for Humanity Canada. And they are. But you got to have that kind of personality to do the work they do. Because I said to them, you know what? They only deal with is homeless and hungry people. And I don't think we're at a place where we can put that kind of conversation aside. I realize it's hard. But it's one of those things where it's hard because it takes you out of your comfort zone. Right? So I say that with all due respect to the comment. But here's what we're going to do, and I think what I really like to do. As we move into the new year, why don't we call on each of you just to give, what's the good news in your life? And we used to do it on the radio. We'd have, what's the good news segment of the show. Something good happened in your life this week. What happened that was really good? Right? So, in my case, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law got to meet our youngest grandson for the first time. That was just awesome. Good fun. And, it's funny how you see adults just reduced to just mush when you you get to hold the 8-week-old, right? So it's just fun. So I expect there will be plenty that's going to happen in your life in the next couple of weeks. What happened this week that was good in your life? And you can either email us at hello@storystudionetwork.com. You can find me on social media at Dave Trafford. That's all the platforms. Otherwise, you can leave us a recorded message. We'd like to hear the story. What good thing happened to you this week? And we'll play it. And then, you know what? We'll highlight that. And we're still going to talk about things that take you out of your comfort zone. But I just thought, okay, point taken. Let's get back to the areas that, how people live and where they live. Yeah, what gets you out of bed in the morning? All right, just a warning now, because we're going to probably take you a little bit out of your comfort zone again. Last week, we had talked about the report from UNICEF on child poverty, and it just so happened to be the day that we were playing the interview I did with Minister Cara in Ottawa, and we were talking about the Canada Disability Benefit and how important that is right now, and the push by the folks at Daily Bread to get it into the spring budget. Right now, the disability benefit is not funded. Okay, but here's the chance. And the whole idea is to use that benefit to raise those who live with disability in this country out of poverty. And the numbers are extraordinary. And I've said this before, and if you've heard me say this before and you're tired of it, too bad. Poverty costs us $33 billion a year in Ontario annually. And those are pre-COVID numbers. And people will say to me, how can we possibly afford, fill in the blank, whatever benefit program? My answer to them is, how can we afford poverty? We just can't. We can't afford it. So when I saw the report coming out from UNICEF this week, and it was interesting, the response was a lot of self-congratulatory, patting themselves on the back to see that Canada, and I don't want to diminish it, because the poverty rate for kids in this country has actually dropped significantly over the last 7 years, and primarily because of the child tax benefit. And we've said that over and over again. That's an example of how and why it works, right? Why we need something better than ODSP in Ontario. But there's still some sinister numbers in that report. And the ones that jump out at me is that 1 in 5 kids live in poverty in 39 of the richest countries in this world. And right at the bottom of the list is the UK, right? So Sevaun Palvetzian is the CEO at UNICEF Canada. And, joins us this morning. And Sevaun, it's one of those things that if you look at the numbers and you look at the number of kids in our lives, we all know some kid who lives in poverty.
Good morning, Dave. And it's really great to be back with you, spending some time connecting in this time of the year. You're absolutely right. I mean, we here in Canada have a lot to be proud of. There are many things. You talk about the patting ourselves on the back. There are many things here in Canada that when we look at where we stand compared to other nations around the world, we deserve to feel great. But one of the things that we cannot feel great about is the number of children that live in poverty today. It's about 1 in 5. And so when tens of millions of kids wake up and head to school with a stomach that's empty, perhaps with clothes, here it is mid-December. I'm always on my to make sure they have the toque on and do up your winter coat. Why don't you do up the winter coat? The ability to stay warm, right, during that cold season, the ability to make sure that there's heat in the house for many families that don't have it. And here we are upon us with the Christmas season, the holiday season, and whether there are gifts under a tree or ability to travel to see loved ones, it is the case that there is not a shared opportunity for so many kids and in this country. And we are, by comparison to many other nations around the world, a high income country, a quote, wealthy nation, right? And so poverty is a choice, Dave. Poverty is a choice. And we should be choosing better for our children and the children of Canada.
That is to say that those who live in poverty don't necessarily choose to live in poverty. Structurally, our economy is set up where, we've decided that that's acceptable and tolerable.
Absolutely. Poverty is a choice by governments with what policies they do or do not want to make. It is not the case that there is equal opportunity spread across all orders of where families live and geographies exist. But our governments and our choices, the electorate, how we choose to put our priorities, where that funding goes, those are all choices. And so if we as a nation decide that we don't want to have so many children living in poverty, then that choice we get to make, and our actions to reflect that, the difference of that, need to be made. We are sitting right now in the middle of high-income countries on child poverty. Canada at 19th out of 39 high-income countries for our current rates of child poverty. That is not a report card you put on the fridge. But
Exactly.
right, it
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
isn't.
Yeah.
We really don't have any reason to pat ourselves in the back to be in the middle of the pack for that. Now, interestingly, though, Dave, for about 10 years preceding 2021, which is the most recent information that's been available, Canada was doing really well on traction. You talked about the Canada Child Benefit as a great example that has lifted a lot of lowest income families up. But what we also see in this data is you can never take your eye off the prize of making this a priority. And so for 10 years, Canada was making traction and seeing traction and making action to be able to reduce those numbers. But 2021, it's a U-turn. It's a U-turn. And so we need to collectively decide what we'll do to reverse course and go back to the trajectory that we had been on, because every child in Canada deserves that.
So let me just follow up on that, because, again, the conversations that I've had, I mentioned Neil Hetherington at Daily Bread and Julia Deans at Habitat. Their forecasting is pretty accurate when they're looking at what the needs are, particularly at the food bank. And Neil will tell you that we are still not at the peak in terms of demand for food banks. 200 and some crazy number, 70,000, I think was the number there, visits a month, and that was about 6 months ago. Who knows what it is now? Do you have similar sort of forecasting that looks down the road to say, if we do not change course, if we do not affect good policy, this is where we're going to be vis-a-vis the number of kids living in poverty over the next 5-10 years?
Absolutely. I mean, some policies. I worked in government for about a decade, the provincial government many years ago, and some policies, the ROI is just so transparent, right? The return on investment that and you cited this too, a dollar spent, in the upstream impact of health, of education, of some of those, creates a downstream effect that is in some case breaking a cycle of multi-generational poverty. And so one of the things that we know from watching trend lines is around something as simple. I say simple because relatively it is, Dave, and some other complex policy pieces, but having a nationally available school food program. In the G7 countries, Canada is the only one that doesn't offer that program. So 1 in 3 kids goes to school hungry every morning. And the ability for Canada to decide and that we don't want that rate of hungry bellies sitting in classrooms trying to learn. That is a policy decision that can be made and funded. And again, relative to some other big ticket items, Dave, this is not one of those huge expenditures, but relative to its impact, it has huge ability to make a difference. And so I know Neil Hetherington very well, Julia Deans as well, incredible leaders, and we all see worrying trend lines. The difference is, will we make this a priority? Child poverty is not natural and it's not intractable. We have the ability through our policy choices and whom we decide and where we decide to fund to make a dent in this. And I think we all agree we should.
Well, in the course of the conversations we've had with the folks at Daily Bread, and we were working on the 2030 project as a series of podcasts for them, and we included voices from Campaign 2000. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that was the campaign that was set up in the 90s when the government of the day said, we're going to eliminate, not just reduce, we're going to eliminate child poverty by the year 2000. Well, here we are 24 years later, and the folks there, Sevaun, use that label and that title now with pride, in as much as they want to make the point that we are, to your point, not choosing something other than poverty for our kids. That in fact this is a badge of dishonor, and they flash that name purposefully now. Not just ironically, but to make the point that we have ignored this for the last quarter century.
A lot was happening in 1989, right? So 1989, the Berlin Wall comes down, the World Web was invented, Taylor Swift, I think, is born in that year, and unanimously, the Parliament of Canada declared a national goal, as you've said, to eliminate poverty for children by the year 2000. It's 2023. That clock has ticked well past that goal. And so it's time to finish the job. It's time to end child poverty. And we are having this conversation in and about Canada. So, I'm president and CEO of UNICEF. We work in advocacy and making sure that the rights of Canadian children are always thought of, protected of, and ensured to be delivered, because there is a convention on the rights of the child that Canada signed, right, back in 1991, that ratified that convention, which said that the rights of children exist in every government. Most governments around the world signed the same. And so it isn't just an academic exercise to think about the need to meet the health, safety, protection of children. It's a ratified convention that Canada held a pen to and signed. And so when I think about 1989 and that commitment of our government to eliminate child poverty, I think about where we sit in 2023. It is not that we have not made efforts to improve, and we have. I talked about that decade of progress, that only 6 countries, Dave, outpaced us in progress in that decade. That's meaningful. But there is no union for children. There is no association for children. We need to make sure that children as a priority group are considered in every public policy matter that does matter. And the ability for report cards like this to show us how we're doing with credible evidence, data-rich insights, to make decision makers in all orders of government aware of the numbers, and then, look in the mirror to say what we expect to do to improve them. This is what's happening in Canada. UNICEF, we have opportunity to see what's happening around the world, Dave. And there are many areas, again, where Canada feels and ought to feel proud in how we are delivering. But the job is far from done. And 1989 was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I have going to be soon a 35-year-old son to say that was an epic year for us as well. So, but you talk about the numbers, and again, I'll go back to all of the issues that we talk around poverty. That's what's overwhelming about this. Mm-hmm. It's the sheer number. So, for anybody listening right now, okay, well, what is it I can do exactly? I can make a donation. I can donate food. I can donate money. I mean, culturally in this country, the UNICEF box was just such a thing during the Halloween season, and we all went out and we collected money thinking we were doing the right thing. And I don't want to say for a second that we weren't. But to some degree, we're letting government and policymakers off the hook by putting a focus on that. Where are we with that?
One of the things I love most about our country is generosity, Dave. And I see it every day in terms of the generosity of Canadians who think about children who don't even belong, to their natural families, their birth families, and they worry about the concerns of children around the world and make donations, in this case to UNICEF, but I know in many other charities across Canada. Canadians are generous. But that is not the job of Canadians to solve intractable public policy issues. That is the job of government. And every year, or every 4 years, whenever that election cycle takes place, and each of us holds our little golf pencil in hand and makes an X next to who we want to elect, we hear promises like the one I talked about in 1989, or promises around what priorities are of government. We hear promises, and often, and sometimes, those promises are met, but other times they fall short. And so I do think it's really important that we not expect Canadian generosity, which has been an important part of the fabric of civil society for 150 years, Dave. I hope that does not get ever turned to as the safety net, because that's not how Canada works. And that's not the responsibility of Canadians to burden this. This is the responsibility of governments here and around the world to say it's unacceptable that through the choices we've made, especially in high-income countries, mm-hmm. where we have made choices with our policies and our budgets, and we have to be honest about what those choices reflect in these numbers. The fact that more than 1 million kids here in Canada are living in poverty with, as you point out, rising rates of poverty, and the fact that 44% of children in single-parent families are poor. These are not numbers that anybody should be proud of, or that I ever want to see Canada reporting on again.
Yeah, I was thinking if we could really kind of reconfigure what government would be. There would be a health ministry. There would be a ministry of children, a ministry of seniors or elders, however we want to put that appropriately. More mature Canadians, let's put it that way. And then, but at the center of it, we talk about the priorities. We talk a lot about poverty. We talk a lot about these services that we're providing. But, I don't see a cabinet seat anywhere that deals specifically with poverty in this country, or perhaps anywhere. Should there not be a minister of poverty in Canada? Because it's such a bottom line budget item cost. I would think we would want to be paying attention to that. Back to your ROI conversation.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting point, Dave. There are different ways to think about how we tackle a problem like child poverty. Some of it is structural. Some of it is leadership accountability. Some of it is the lens through which decisions are made. I know we have a federal government that, thinks about the investments through different lenses. And recently, the Ministry of Justice at the federal level has been able to consider how to use a lens of child impact in decisions that come through that ministry, which actually makes a lot of sense, Dave, is super smart. Because how do politicians and how do civil servants make decisions? What are the important criteria and the lens through which those are evaluated? Making sure that a child impact lens is evaluated across policy decisions across the board means that some of these issues will be looked at differently. It may be the case that it needs to have dedicated leadership like you've just described in a cabinet position, et cetera, but it is not the only way to make sure that decision makers think about the needs of children. And like I'd stated earlier, there isn't a lobbying group for kids. There is not a professional association for children. It is kids don't have a voice in the same way that other groups do. And so I think it is incumbent upon all decision makers and all orders of government to be able to have the best interests of children front and center. The rates of poverty that we've talked about, they're even higher, Dave, as you know, among Indigenous, racialized and disabled children, much higher than the national average. And so we want to make sure that lens has nuance to it and factors in the range of considerations that children in this country have to live through. Because yes, we are a high income country relative to others, but our high income status is not equally spread across every family and every child that lives here.
Okay, we're heading into the holiday, and there'll be a lot of opportunity to have this conversation for many of us over tables of plenty, et cetera. And I sense that that's become more of literally a kitchen table conversation. So here's hoping that we can kind of turn the corner as we move into the new year. I'm going to put you on the spot. I said off the top, I wanted to know from folks who are listening what good thing happened to them. So can we finish on that note?
Yes, we sure can.
Something good that happened to you in the last week or month. What was remarkable?
Oh, well, this season is admittedly one of my favorites, Dave. And I come from a huge family. I'm the eldest of 5 kids. There are now 10 grandchildren on that side alone. And once a year, and it just happened on Saturday this past weekend, once a year, the whole gaggle of us get together and bake. And
nice. It
is 50 degrees of chaos in that, like, honest to goodness, you won't even see. It's a disaster at the end. But we made, so there must have been 20 something of us, ranging from age, I won't give my mom's age because she will be so upset if I tell you, but from grandma down to the newest Palvetzian member, who is a matter of a few months old. And so the whole gaggle assembled and did some Christmas baking, and oh my gosh, it was outstanding fun. So that has to be, I'm still smiling from it and frankly brushing my teeth accordingly because there's a lot of sugar, but it was a ton of fun to do and makes me very happy. So that was a highlight for me of recent days for sure.
Yeah, that actually, my wife's recently retired and has taken up a French pastry course online. So that has been a lot of activity in our kitchen, and the grandkids love doing that. So that actually has.
Wait, how lucky are you? You're telling me your wife has taken up French pastry making? Yeah, you are the luckiest man right now.
Well, here's the problem. I'm not a sweets guy, but I'm the sampler, right? So
Sounds really rough, Dave.
It is.
Sounds really rough.
It's terrible. Sevaun, thank you for being here. Congratulations on your relatively new role at UNICEF Canada. They should be glad and proud to have you, because I know that based on the passion that we just exposed in terms of your concern with the kids who live in this country and around the world, yours is a necessary and needed voice. So thanks for sharing it with us today.
Thank you, Dave. It's truly my privilege to be part of the incredible UNICEF team, and it's so great to get to spend some time with you again. I've missed you, so thanks for having me on.
Well, we kind of parted ways when I was at Bell and you were at Rogers, and we couldn't talk to each other. I mean, basically, that's.
Friendship endures. Friendship
right.
endures, as does good baking. Have a good set of holidays, Dave.
Tis the season for it. Sevaun Palvetzian is the Chief Executive Officer at UNICEF Canada, and if you want more information, please go and check out their website, which would be unicef.ca, because it's Canada. Very good. All right, that'll do it for us. It's Now and Next here for Story Studio Network.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Hey, if you've got thoughts about the show, just leave us a comment and a rating wherever you're listening. And you can also have your say on the show. Just click the Record Your Message link in our show notes. Leave us a comment. Chances are we'll include it in an upcoming episode, and we will definitely respond. Now and Next is produced by me, Dave Trafford, with support and patience of the entire SSN team. Thanks for listening.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.